there's a huge cost to lost orders, right? So if you don't have it available, you can't connect the buyer and the seller in your supply chain. You've now lost not just that sale, but you do that enough times and guess what you lose? You lose the customer. And if you lose customers, then guess what?
Your business starts to lose.
You don't have any reason to be there.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast. My name is Marissa, head of marketing here for TGW North America, and I'm joined today with Nathan Wolf, my coworker. Today we want to talk about business case for warehouse automation, ROI, payback, all that good stuff. I feel like I should have brought my glasses to make me look a little bit smarter, especially next to you.
Listen, it's not hard to do that. So I think you're in good, in good shape. Yep.
Well, maybe to kick things off, I know we've both been here about 3.5 years, but you have almost a decade or more of experience. Maybe you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, hello, everyone. My name's Nathan Wolf, Director of Sales with TGW. So my career started actually from an automation perspective on the mobile automation side. So AGVs, AMRs, all that fun stuff, right? Laser guided fork trucks driving around. And actually started on the project side of the business, which I think has given me sort of a lot of valuable insight now that I'm working more on the solutions and sales side. But worked my way up through that, managed our project teams, operations, and eventually the overall business there. Took a small, brief hiatus to go into...
Needed a mental break.
Aerospace composites, and helped stood up a new manufacturing center for that. But the call for automation was just too strong. And so I ended up coming back to TGW about 4 years ago. And here I sit today.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, maybe to kick things off with our conversation, just start at the very high level. I think often, especially with newer customers, one of the first things we hear when they talk about warehouse automation is a little bit of hesitation around that initial investment. And that makes sense because, especially for end to end, we're talking about tens of millions, maybe 100 million plus for these projects. But maybe what do you say to those sort of reservations that customers have?
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? And it sounds so cliche, is to say, can you afford not to automate?
Yeah.
And sort of the reason why I say that is if you can deal with, the rising costs of labor, rising costs of land, the cost of lost orders, lost productivity, all of those different types of things, then maybe automation's not for you. But if those create challenges in your business today, you can't afford not to for the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like we're seeing in a lot of industries, grocery especially, where margins are getting so tight. And so like you say, if you're facing rising labor costs, shrinking labor pool, increasing SLA expectations, especially on like the retail side, and the pressure to keep customer loyalty, like you say, it's hard to not look into it at least.
Yeah, customer loyalty is huge. And so like, I'll ask you maybe a quick question is to say, us in supply chain at its core, like if we distill it down to its simplest form, what are we doing? What we're doing is we're connecting buyers and sellers.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And so all of us, maybe this is some of the Amazon effect, but also too, we live in a very digital age where things are very immediate, right? If I don't have it on the shelf at the grocery store here, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to the grocery store that's right around the corner. If I can't get the TV I want at Best Buy, guess what? I'm going to go to Target or Meijer or wherever else that carries TVs. Same thing with the shirt I need for the weekend, right? Because I need to look nice. I got a nice date with my wife, and all I have is ratty t-shirts. So I need to buy something, but I need it in a day. I'm going to order it from where I can get it in a day, right? And automation enables those types of things, right? And so there's a huge cost to lost orders, right? So if you don't have it available, you can't connect the buyer and the seller in your supply chain. You've now lost not just that sale, but you do that enough times and guess what you lose? You lose the customer. And if you lose customers, then guess what?
Your business starts to lose.
You don't have any reason to be there, right? At the end of the day. So having automation that you can rely on, that provides you with consistency, right? That has an output and a throughput that every day you can come to work and you know what you're going to get out the door
Yeah.
is hugely, hugely valuable.
Yeah.
Right. And you retain those customers, you make it easier for them to get what they want. And then at the end of the day, now they rely on you and they're always going to be your customer.
Yeah. 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 That makes a lot of sense. So maybe let's get into some specifics here. Like I said, we've worked for 3.5 years. I think one thing that I've really observed in you is you are really good at putting the business case front and center with your customers and always making sure like you're not going to sell something if it doesn't make sense for their bottom line. And I think that's something that we try to assure them a lot is we're keeping that business case front and center. But what does that really mean in like the regular conversations or touch points that you're having with them?
Yeah. So when it comes to building out the overall business case, number one is just really understanding what problem are they trying to solve. We can look at the data and we can develop a solution that automates a substantial amount of a facility, right? But that doesn't always pay back because as you start to bring more and more and more into the automation and you're asking it to do more and more unique things, that builds cost, right? And those don't necessarily have a payback. So we like to look at where we can solve the biggest problems first and then see if we can sort of build things on from that. And then from there, we look at, okay, what are those different types of things that we talked about earlier, right? The cost of not automating, labor is obviously a big one, right? If we say, hey, traditional picking environment, someone can pick 150 to 250, units an hour. And if it's semi-automated, then maybe they get to 300 to 400. But in a fully automated, maybe you can get to 700, 800.
Yeah.
There's huge efficiency gains there, right? That now allow you to do more with less and allows your operation to just run in a way that it never has before. And so then you build the trust in your supply chain, you fulfill orders and customers are happy and therefore they order more. And
yeah, so maybe in addition to labor then, what are some of the biggest levers that typically make up the ROI or payback for warehouse automation?
Yeah. I mean, labor is huge, right? And that one's big, but there's also a lot of, let's say, underestimated components of a business case. Number one, cost of lost orders is huge. We've talked about it a lot here already. The other thing, other things are, substantial reduction in maintenance costs.
Sure.
You look at this big automated system and you say, oh, there's got to be a lot of maintenance. But in general, you think about all your fork trucks, all your walkie riders, all of the batteries, right? All of those things, that's a huge burden on your maintenance team that, you can simplify substantially with automation that you don't have to deal with. As you reduce or become more efficient in your environment, you can have a reduction in overall supervisory costs, right? Because you don't have people all over a building that you're trying to keep track of. They're focused in specific areas, working very efficiently. And so it's very easy to supervise and support those people, right? So there's a lot of tweaks within a business case that you can look at to really help let's say the finance folks better understand, the benefits of the automation.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, all the different customer projects that we've done over the years. There's some really interesting ways to pull out the business case too. Like I think a really interesting example that you've worked on is for a major food service distributor where the business case is not actually in the warehouse. It's what happens outside after the four walls. Maybe you want to talk a little bit more about that one.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, some of the things that automation can provide for you is an easier and a better way to deliver to your customers. And especially specifically, we're talking, in the grocery environment. And let's say in the case of food service, or even in the case of a traditional grocery store, right? If you're able to build out pallets in a way that they can be unloaded efficiently at the customer or at the end store, you can dramatically reduce the labor because in typical environments, people are digging out cases, because pick paths within a warehouse have been optimized for picking efficiency, but not for delivery efficiency. And with automation, because you take that travel time out of it on the walkie rider and all those things, you can build in less time a pallet that is actually more efficient for the delivery side. So think about, you're delivering at a local restaurant, right? You have everything you need for that restaurant right on top of that first pallet. And then the next
So
restaurant.
you're not digging through, okay, I need one of this, one of this. Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing at like a grocery store. Imagine if you could just pull the pallet right off the truck and take it right out into your aisle. You don't have to sort it. You don't have to do anything. And you can walk right up and down the aisle and take things off that pallet and put it right on the shelf and replenish those shelves.
Yeah, that's huge.
It's a huge increase in labor that is maybe unseen, but when you look at it holistically across that, say, that delivery chain, it can add up pretty substantially.
Yeah, and I imagine it's better for the workers too. Like it makes them want to actually stay in these jobs that historically they're pretty high turnover.
Right. I mean, cases can be heavy, and you're bending over, you're reaching up and you're grabbing things, and it's labor intensive.
Yeah.
Right. And it's physical, and if you can make that easier for someone, you can make their job easier, they're absolutely going to work more efficiently, and they're going to be happier. You're going to see a lot less turnover in those environments.
Yeah. So maybe I pivot a little bit. What do you kind of see as the typical ROI or payback period that our customers are looking for? And can they realistically achieve that with the warehouse automation systems?
I mean, absolutely, right? We have numerous examples, right? Pretty much every one of our implementations was done because it met a business case. There are very few places that just buy because they can.
It would be nice if they had that much money, right?
It is. There's an occasional one. I've seen it before, but those are the rare, those are the unicorns, not the normal situations. And in most cases, we're looking at an ROI of somewhere between 2 years and 5 years. Just depending on the application and the type of investment that we're looking at. Most of the time we have customers that are looking for an IRR of 12% or higher. Oftentimes we're in the 20s. So, I mean, we're really able to, if we look at the solution holistically, provide a really strong business case for the automation that provides a fantastic payback for the business, not just financially, but also in operational stability, right? And that's the one that's really hard to put a number on. But at the end of the day becomes one of the biggest unseen benefits of the automation, or at least from a paper perspective, right? When you're looking at it with your CFO or whoever else is justifying that project.
Yeah. So besides ROI, IR, MPV, all the other acronyms that people throw around, it seems like our customers also like to know the total cost of ownership, which is kind of maybe a different way to look at the warehouse automation. So what sort of costs can go into the total cost of warehouse automation? How do you guide customers and how they think about that?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the total cost of ownership, you're going to have some maybe initial investment costs in some additional data and some additional power that goes into the building, right? To support the automation. Those typically go upfront costs in the project. But on the back end, it's mostly maintenance costs. And that can be 10 to 15% of the overall cost of the automation. And when I say that, that's not just spare parts.
Yeah.
So, right, that's the labor that it takes to manage and maintain that system, fix errors, replace parts, do preventative maintenance, and really take care of that system for the long term.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, that has a payback in itself.
Because you got to protect this big investment that you just made.
Exactly. And if you maintain it, just like anything else, like your car, right?
Yeah.
If you take it in, consistent oil changes and all those different types of things, it's going to run a lot longer and a lot more efficiently and have less bigger out-of-pocket, problems than if you were to just run it until it starts smoking and then pull into the dealership and hope that it's not going to cost you, an arm and a leg, right?
Yeah, I think one other aspect that I want to talk on a little bit here is even if the ROI is there, the business case is there, sometimes there's still a lack of funding options. Like, there's market uncertainty like we're seeing right now with tariffs or inflation a couple of years ago. And so that leads to a tightening of belts, tightening of budgets, maybe there's interest rates causing concern. And so does that mean that it's dead in the water or what sort of other things can people look into?
Yeah. So there's a lot of options. One of the beautiful things about being in the United States is we have very creative financial systems. And so there's a lot of options for someone looking to fund an automation project. and not just use the capital that they have available as a business, right? So first and foremost, right, you can spend capital. The traditional way, you have a savings account and you're spending it on a new building or, an expansion to the building or putting automation into an existing building, whatever it might be. And that's pretty typical, pretty traditional. We have partners that we have worked with that will finance the building and the automation together, right? So you work with a partner who is going to finance that. And at the end of the day, it becomes a leasing cost. You're leasing the automation in the building back from that financial institution. And at that point, you don't have a capital cost, you have an operating cost, right? That hits every single month. From that perspective, you can spend capital on the building and you can lease the automation.
Sure.
There are companies that will just lease the automation as well, right? From that perspective. And then there's some newer things that we're kind of seeing on the market where you can even do things like synthetic leasing on your building, which is effectively now not a finance expert. So consult your local finance wizard on this, but effectively you create a separate company that holds your asset, right?
Okay.
And then that asset takes the depreciation. So it doesn't go on, your P&L for the business itself. And then you just lease back from that, from that holding company. And then essentially they can kind of set the rent whatever they want it to be monthly, right? For it to make sense for the business. And then again, that's just another operating expense. So there's a lot of sort of unique ways to fund automation if, you want to reserve capital for some other expense, or if you're just struggling to generate enough capital to do a large enough project that makes sense for your business.
Yeah, that's kind of what I imagine the pros and cons to these are is, it just kind of depends on what's your financial strategy. Do you need to hold on to cash because you're kind of cash strapped?
Right.
Or are you okay with using that cash up front? Do you see any sort of trends based on industry or customers that you're talking to?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely industry trends, right? If you look at, the three main industries that we serve: grocery, fashion, and we're talking finance, and industrial and consumer, right? On the low end of that is typically grocery. Grocery is generally a high volume business from a overall revenue perspective, but very low margins, right? We're talking 2, 3, 4% at the end of the day. Whereas our fashion customers can be 50%, at least from a gross profit perspective, but even still at the end of the day, they might be 15 to 20%, from an EBIT perspective. And then your industrial and consumer probably falls somewhere in between, right? So depending on the size and scale of the business, you're going to have access to more or less capital. And so for those who, run a much lower margin business and want to save their capital and hold on to it, to just make sure that they have additional financial security, that leasing route goes a long way to really helping them feel comfortable with investing in automation, but also making sure that they're safeguarding, the future of the business for those ups and downs and those swings in that low margin environment that they live in. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground here. We probably could have a whole other podcast. We'll get into all sorts of different weeds, but maybe that's for another day.
Sure.
But if our listeners want to maybe talk to you more about this, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, probably reach out to me on LinkedIn, Nathan Wolf, TGW North America. You'll find me out there, and just send me a message and I'll be happy to connect and talk more about automation.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening. That's it for today, and you can catch us on the next episode.